To her own despair answer the mother made, as one she cried who in her heavy heart labors amid the sobbing of her hopes to wake a note of help from sadder strings. O child, in the magnificence of thy soul dwelling on the border of a greater world, who is the lover and who is the friend? All passes here, nothing remains the same. None is for any on this transient globe. He whom thou lovest now, a stranger came and into a far strangeness shall depart. His moments part once done upon life's stage, which for a time was given him from within. To other scenes he moves and other players and laughs and weeps mid faces new, unknown. The body thou hast loved is cast away amidst the brute unchanging stuff of worlds to indifferent mighty nature and becomes crude matter for the joy of others' lives. But for our souls, upon the wheel of God for ever turning, they arrive and go, married and sundered in the magic round of the great dancer of the boundless dance. Our emotions are but high and dying notes of his wild music, changed compellingly by the passionate movements of a seeking heart in the inconstant links of our with our. To call down heaven's distant answering song, to cry to an unseized bliss is all we dare. Once seized, we lose the heavenly music sense. Too near, the rhythmic cry has fled or failed. All sweetnesses are baffling symbols here. Love dies before the lover in our breast, our joys are perfumes in a brittle vase. Oh then what wreck is this upon time's sea to spread life's sails to the hurricane desire and call for pilot the unseeing heart? O child, wilt thou proclaim, wilt thou then follow against the law that is the eternal will, the autarky of the rash Titan's mood, to whom his own fierce will is the one law in a world where truth is not, nor light nor God, only the gods can speak what now thou speakst. Thou who art human, think not like a god. For man, below the god, above the brute, is given the calm reason as his guide. He is not driven by an unthinking will as are the actions of the bird and beast. He is not moved by stark necessity like the senseless motion of inconscient things. The giants and the Titans' furious march climbs to usurp the kingdom of the gods or skirts the demon magnitudes of hell. In the unreflecting passion of their hearts they dash their lives against the eternal law and fall and break by their own violent mass. The middle path is made for thinking man. To choose his steps by reason's vigilant light, to choose his path among the many paths is given him, for each his difficult goal hewn out of infinite possibility. Leave not thy goal to follow a beautiful face. Only when thou hast climbed above thy mind and livest in the calm vastness of the one can love be eternal in the eternal bliss and love divine replace the human tie. There is a shrouded law, an austere force, it bids thee strengthen thy undying spirit, it offers its severe benignancies of work and thought and measured grave delight as steps to climb to God's far secret heights. Then is our life a tranquil pilgrimage, each year a mile upon the heavenly way, each dawn opens into a larger light. Thy acts are thy helpers, all events are signs, waking and sleep are opportunities given to thee by an immortal power. So canst thou raise thy pure unvanquished spirit, till spread to heaven in a wide vesper calm, indifferent and gentle as the sky, it greatens slowly into timeless peace. But Savitri replied with steadfast eyes, my will is part of the eternal will, my fate is what my spirit's strength can make, my fate is what my spirit's strength can bear, my strength is not the Titan's, it is God's. I have discovered my glad reality beyond my body in another's being, I have found the deep unchanging soul of love. Then how shall I desire a lonely good, or slay, aspiring to white vacant peace, the endless hope that made my soul spring forth out of its infinite solitude and sleep? My spirit has glimpsed the glory for which it came, the beating of one vast heart in the flame of things, my eternity clasped by his eternity and, tireless of the sweet abysms of time, deep possibility always to love. This is first, last joy, and to its throb the riches of 1,000 fortunate years are poverty. Nothing to me are death and grief or ordinary lives and happy days. And what to me are common souls of men or eyes and lips that are not such ovens? I have no need to draw back from his arms and the discovered paradise of his love and journey into a still infinity. Only now for my soul in such oven I treasure the rich occasion of my birth, in sunlight and a dream of emerald ways I shall walk with him like gods in paradise. If for a year, That for I know now why my spirit came on earth and who I am and who he is I love. I have looked at him from my immortal self, I have seen God smile at me in such Arvin, I have seen the eternal in a human face, then none could answer to her words. Silent they sat and looked into the eyes of fate. Canto 2. The way of fate and the problem of pain. A silence sealed the irrevocable decree, the word of fate that fell from heavenly lips fixing a doom no power could ever reverse unless heaven's will itself could change its course. Or so it seemed, yet from the silence rose one voice that questioned changeless destiny, a will that strove against the immutable will. A mother's heart had heard the fateful speech that rang like a sanction to the call of death and came like a chill close to life and hope. Yet hope sank down like an extinguished fire. She felt the leaden inevitable hand invade the secrecy of her guarded soul and smite with sudden pain its still content and the empire of her hard-won quietude. A while she fell to the level of human mind, a field of mortal grief and nature's law, she shared, she bore the common lot of men and felt what common hearts endure in time. Voicing earth's question to the inscrutable power, the queen now turned to the still immobile seer, assailed by the discontent in nature's depths, partner in the agony of dumb-driven things and all the misery, all the ignorant cry, passionate like sorrow questioning heaven she spoke. Lending her speech to the surface soul on earth she uttered the suffering in the world's dumb heart and man's revolt against his ignorant fate. O seer, in the earth's strange chi-natured life by what pitiless adverse necessity or what cold freak of a creator's will, by what random accident or governed chance that shaped a rule out of fortuitous steps, made destiny from an hour's emotion, came into the unreadable mystery of time the direr mystery of grief and pain. Is it thy God who made this cruel law? Or some disastrous power has marred his work and he stands helpless to defend or save? A fatal seed was sown in life's full start when evil twinned with good on earthly soil. Then first appeared the malady of mind, its pang of thought, its quest for the aim of life. It twisted into forms of good and ill the frank simplicity of the animal's acts, it turned the straight path hewn by the body's gods, followed the zigzag of the uncertain course of life that wanders seeking for its aim in the pale starlight falling from thought's skies, its guides the unsure idea, the wavering will. Lost was the instinct's safe identity with the arrow point of being's inmost sight, marred the sure steps of nature's simple walk and truth and freedom in the growing soul. Out of some ageless innocence and peace, privilege of souls not yet betrayed to birth, cast down to suffer on this hard dangerous earth our life was born in pain and with a cry. Although earth nature welcomes heaven's breath-inspiring matter with the will to live, 1,000 ills assail the mortal's hours and wear away the natural joy of life. Our bodies are an engine cunningly made, but for all its parts as cunningly are planned, contrived ingeniously with demon skill, its apt inevitable heritage its payment of the tax of time and fate, its way to suffer and its way to die. This is the ransom of our high estate, the sign and stamp of our humanity. A grisly company of maladies come, licensed lodgers, into man's bodily house, purveyors of death and torturers of life. In the malignant hollows of the world, in its subconscient cavern, passages ambushed they lie waiting their hour to leap, surrounding with danger the sieged city of life, admitted into the citadel of man's days they mine his force and maim or suddenly kill. Ourselves within us lethal forces nurse, we make of our own enemies our guests, out of their holes like beasts they creep and gnaw the chords of the divine musician's lyre till frayed and thin the music dies away or crashing snaps with a last tragic note. All that we are is like a fort beset, all that we strive to be alters like a dream in the grey sleep of matter's ignorance. Mind suffers lamed by the world's disharmony and the unloveliness of human things. A treasure misspent or cheaply, fruitlessly sold in the bazaar of a blind destiny, a gift of priceless value from time's gods lost or mislaid in an uncaring world, life is a marvel missed, an art gone wry, a seeker in a dark and obscure place, an ill-armed warrior facing dreadful odds, an imperfect worker given a baffling task, an ignorant judge of problems ignorance made, its heavenward flights reach closed and keyless gates, its glorious all walks enarmed by its own opposites, error is the Comrade of our mortal thought and fossard lurks in the deep bosom of truth, sin poisons with its vivid flowers of joy or leaves a red scar burnt across the soul, virtue is a grey bondage and a gale. At every step is laid for us a snare. Alien to reason and the spirit's light, our fount of action from a darkness wells, in ignorance and nescience are our roots. A growing register of calamities is the past's account, the future's book of fate, the centuries pile man's follies and man's crimes upon the countless crowd of nature's ills, as if the world's stone load was not enough, a crop of miseries obstinately is sown by his own hand in the furrows of the gods, the vast increasing tragic harvest reaped from old misdeeds buried by oblivious time. He walks by his own choice into hell's trap, this mortal creature is his own worst foe. His science is an artificer of doom, he ransacks earth for means to harm his kind, he slays his happiness and others' good. Nothing has he learned from time and its history, even as of old in the raw youth of time, when earth ignorant ran on the highways of fate, old forms of evil cling to the world's soul. War making naught the sweet smiling calm of life, battle and rapine, ruin and massacre are still the fierce pastimes of man's warring tribes, an idiot destroys what centuries made, his wanton rage or frenzied hate lays low his grandeur he turns to an epic of doom and fall, his littleness crawls content through squalor and mud, he calls heaven's retribution on his head and wallows in his self-made misery. A part author of the cosmic tragedy, his will conspires with death and time and fate. His brief appearance on the enigmaed earth ever occurs but brings no high result to this wanderer through the eon rings of God that shut his life in their vast longevity. His soul's wide search and ever-returning hopes pursue the useless orbit of their course in a vain repetition of lost toils across a track of soon-forgotten lives. All is an episode in a meaningless tale. Why is it all and wherefore are we here? If to some being of eternal bliss it is our spirit's destiny to return or some still impersonal height of endless calm, since that we are and out of that we came, whence rose the strange and sterile interlude lasting in vain through interminable time? Who will to form or feign a universe in the cold and endless emptiness of space? Or if these beings must be in their brief lives, what need had the soul of ignorance and tears? Whence rose the call for sorrow and for pain? Or all came helplessly without a cause? What power forced the immortal spirit to birth? The eternal witness once of eternity, a deathless sojourner mid transient scenes, he camps in life's half-lit obscurity amid the debris of his thoughts and dreams. Or who persuaded it to fall from bliss a wanderer in this beautiful, sorrowful world, and bear its load of joy and grief and love? Or if no being watches the works of time, what hard impersonal necessity compels the vain toil of brief living things? A great illusion then has built the stars. But where then is the soul's security, its poise in this circling of unreal suns? Or else it is a wanderer from its home who strayed into a blind alley of time and chance and finds no issue from a meaningless world. Or where begins and ends illusion's reign? Perhaps the soul we feel is only a dream, eternal self a fiction sensed in trance. Then after a silence Narad made reply, tuning his lips to earthly sound he spoke, and something now of the deep sense of fate weighted the fragile hints of mortal speech. His forehead shone with vision solemnized, turned to a tablet of supernal thoughts as if characters of an unwritten tongue had left in its breadth the inscriptions of the gods. Bare in that light time toiled, his unseen works detected, the broad flung far, seeing schemes unfinished which his eoned flight unrolls were mapped already in that world-wide look. Was then the sun a dream because there is night? Hidden in the mortal's heart the eternal lives, he lives secret in the chamber of thy soul, a light shines there nor pain nor grief can cross. A darkness stands between thyself and him, thou canst not hear or feel the marvelous guest, thou canst not see the beatific Sunday, O Queen, thy thought is a light of the ignorance, its brilliant curtain hides from thee God's face. It illumes a world born from the inconscience but hides the immortal's meaning in the world. Thy mind's light hides from thee the eternal's thought, thy heart's hopes hide from thee the eternal's will, earth's joys shut from thee the immortal's bliss. Thence rose the need of a dark intruding God, the world's dread teacher, the Creator, pain. Where ignorance is, there suffering too must come. Thy grief is a cry of darkness to the light. Pain was the firstborn of the inconscience which was thy body's dumb original base. Already slept their pain's subconscient shape, a shadow in a shadowy tenebrous womb. Till life shall move, it waits to wake and be. In one call with joy came forth the dreadful power. In life's breast it was born hiding its twin, but pain came first, then only joy could be. Pain ploughed the first hard ground of the world drowse. By pain a spirit started from the clod, by pain life stirred in the subliminal deep. Interned, submerged, hidden in matter's trance awoke to itself the dreamer, sleeping mind. It made a visible realm out of its dreams, it drew its shapes from the subconscient depths, then turned to look upon the world it had made. By pain and joy, the bright and tenebrous twins, the inanimate world perceived its sentient soul, else had the inconscient never suffered change. Pain is the hammer of the gods to break a dead resistance in the mortal's heart, his slow inertia as of living stone. If the heart were not forced to want and weep, his soul would have lain down content, at ease, and never thought to exceed the human start and never learned to climb towards the sun throes of an endless birth coerce her still. The centuries end, the ages vainly pass and yet the Godhead in her is not born. The ancient mother faces all with joy, calls for the ardent pang, the grandiose thrill, for with pain and labor all creation comes. This earth is full of the anguish of the gods, ever they travel driven by time's goad, and strive to work out the eternal will and shape the life divine in mortal forms. His will must be worked out in human breasts against the evil that rises from the gulfs, against the world's ignorance and its obstinate strength, against the stumblings of man's pervert will, against the deep folly of his human mind, against the blind reluctance of his heart. The spirit is doomed to pain till man is free. There is a clamor of battle, a tramp, a march, a cry arises like a moaning sea, a desperate laughter under the blows of death, a doom of blood and sweat and toil and tears. Men die that man may live and God be born. An awful silence watches tragic time. Pain is the hand of nature sculpturing men to greatness, an inspired labor chisels with heavenly cruelty and unwilling mold. Implacable in the passion of their will, lifting the hammers of titanic toil the demiurges of the universe work, they shape with giant strokes their own, their sons are marked with their enormous stamp of fire. Although the shaping god's tremendous touch is torture unbearable to mortal nerves, the fiery spirit grows in strength within and feels a joy in every titan pang. He who would save the race must share its pain, this he shall know who obeys that grandiose urge. The great who came to save this suffering world and rescue out of time's shadow and the law, must pass beneath the yoke of grief and pain. They are caught by the will that they had hoped to break, on their shoulders they must bear man's load of fate. Heaven's riches they bring, their sufferings count the price or they pay the gift of knowledge with their lives. The Son of God born as the Son of Man has drunk the bitter cup, owned Godhead's debt, the debt the eternal owes to the fallen kind his will has bound to death and struggling life that yearns in vain for rest and endless peace. Now is the debt paid, wiped off the original score. The Eternal suffers in a human form, he has signed salvation's testament with his blood, he has opened the doors of his undying peace. The deity compensates the creature's claim, the Creator bears the law of pain and death, a retribution smites the incarnate God. His love has paved the mortal's road to heaven, he has given his life and light to balance here the dark account of mortal ignorance. It is finished, the dread mysterious sacrifice, offered by God's martyred body for the world, Gethsemane and Calvary are his lot, he carries the cross on which man's soul is nailed, his escort is the curses of the crowd, insult and jeer are his right's acknowledgement, 2 thieves slain with him mock his mighty death. He has trod with bleeding brow the Saviour's way. He who has found his identity with God pays with the body's death his soul's vast light. His knowledge immortal triumphs by his death. Hewn, quartered on the scaffold as he falls, his crucified voice proclaims, I am God, yes, all is God, peals back heaven's deathless call. The seed of Godhead sleeps in mortal hearts, The flower of Godhead grows on the world tree, all shall discover God in self and things. But when God's messenger comes to help the world and lead the soul of earth to higher things, he too must carry the yoke he came to unloose, he too must bear the pang that he would heal, exempt and unafflicted by earth's fate. How shall he cure the ills he never felt? He covers the world's agony with his calm, but though to the outward eye no sign appears and peace is given to our torn human hearts, the struggle is there and paid the unseen price, the fire, the strife, the wrestle are within. He carries the suffering world in his own breast, its sins weigh on his thoughts, its grief is his, earth's ancient load lies heavy on his soul, night and its powers beleaguer his tardy steps, the Titan adversary's clutch he bears, his march is a battle and a pilgrimage. Life's evil smites, he is stricken with the world's pain, a million wounds gape in his secret heart. He journeys sleepless through an unending night, antagonist forces crowd across his path, a siege, a combat is his inner life. Even worse may be the cost, direr the pain, his large identity and all-harboring love shall bring the cosmic anguish into his depths. The sorrow of all living things shall come and knock at his doors and live within his house. A dreadful cord of sympathy can tie all suffering into his single grief and make all agony in all the worlds his own. He is lashed with the whips that tear the world's worn heart. The weeping of the centuries visits his eyes, he wears the blood-glued fiery centaur shirt, the poison of the world has stained his throat. In the marketplace of matter's capital amidst the chafferings of the affair called life he is tied to the stake of a perennial fire, he burns on an unseen original verge that matter may be turned to spirit stuff, he is the victim in his own sacrifice. The immortal bound to earth's mortality appearing and perishing on the roads of time creates God's moment by eternity's beats. He dies that the world may be newborn and live. Even if he escapes the fiercest fires, even if the world breaks not in a drowning sea, only by hard sacrifice is high heaven earned, he must face the fight, the pang who would conquer hell. A dark concealed hostility is lodged in the human depths, in the hidden heart of time that claims the right to change and mar God's work. A secret enmity ambushes the world's march, it leaves a mark on thought and speech and act, it stamps stain and defect on all things done, till it is slain peace is forbidden on earth. There is no visible foe, but the unseen is round us, forces intangible besiege, touches from alien realms, thoughts not our own overtake us and compel the erring heart, our lives are caught in an ambiguous net. An adversary force was born of old, invader of the life of mortal man, it hides from him the straight immortal path. A power came in to veil the eternal light, contorts the contours of the cosmic plan, a whisper lures to evil the human heart, it seals up wisdom's eyes, the soul's regard, it is the origin of our suffering here, it binds earth to calamity and pain. This all must conquer who would bring down God's peace. This hidden foe lodged in the human breast man must overcome or miss his higher fate. This is the inner war without escape, hard is the world redeemer's heavy task, the world itself becomes his adversary, those he would save are his antagonists, this world is in love with its own ignorance, its darkness turns away from the Saviour light, it gives the cross in payment for the crown. His work is a trickle of splendor in a long night, he sees the long march of time, the little one, a few are saved, the rest strive on and fail, a sun has passed, on earth night's shadow falls. Yes, there are happy ways near to God's Son, but few are they who tread the sunlit path, only the pure in soul can walk in light. An exit is shown, a road of hard escape from the sorrow and the darkness and the chain, but how shall a few escaped release the world? The human mass lingers beneath the yoke. Escape, however high, redeems not life, life that is left behind on a fallen earth. Escape cannot uplift the abandoned race or bring to it victory and the reign of God. A greater power must come, a larger light. Although light grows on earth and night recedes, yet till the evil is slain in its own home and light invades the world's inconscient base and perished has the adversary force, he still must labor on, his work half done. One yet may come armored, invincible, his will immobile meets the mobile hour, the world's blows cannot bend that victor head, calm and sure are his steps in the growing night, the goal recedes, he hurries not his pace, he turns not to high voices in the night, he asks no aid from the inferior gods, his eyes are fixed on his immutable aim. Man turns aside or chooses easier paths, he keeps to the one high and difficult road that soul can climb to the eternal's peaks, the ineffable plains already have felt his tread, he has made heaven and earth his instruments, but the limits fall from him of earth and heaven, their law he transcends but uses as his means. He has seized life's hands, he has mastered his own heart. The feints of nature mislead not his sight, inflexible his look towards truth's far end, fate's deaf resistance cannot break his will. In the dreadful passages, the fatal paths, invulnerable his soul, his heart unslain, he lives through the opposition of earth's powers and nature's ambushes and the world's attacks. His spirit's stature transcending pain and bliss, he fronts evil and good with calm and equal eyes. He too must grapple with the riddling sphinx and plunge into her long obscurity. He has broken into the inconscious depths that veil themselves even from their own regard, he has seen God's slumber shape these magic worlds. He has watched the dumb God fashioning matter's frame, dreaming the dreams of its unknowing sleep, and watched the unconscious force that built the stars. He has learned the inconscious workings and its law, its incoherent thoughts and rigid acts, its hazard wastes of impulse and idea, the chaos of its mechanic frequencies, its random calls, its whispers falsely true, misleaders of the hooded listening soul. All things come to its ear but nothing abides, all rose from the silence, all goes back to its hush. Its somnolence founded the universe, its obscure waking makes the world seem vain. Arisen from nothingness and towards nothingness turned, its dark and potent nescience was earth's start, it is the waste stuff from which all was made, into its deeps creation can collapse. Its opposition clogs the march of the soul, it is the mother of our ignorance. He must call light into its dark abysms, else never can truth conquer matter's sleep and all earth look into the eyes of God. All things obscure his knowledge must relume, all things perverse his power must unknot, he must pass to the other shore of fossed sea, he must enter the world's dark to bring their light. The heart of evil must be bared to his eyes, he must learn its cosmic dark necessity, its right and its dire roots in nature's soil. He must know the thought that moves the demon act and justifies the titan's erring pride and the fossed lurking in earth's crooked dreams. He must enter the eternity of night and know God's darkness as he knows his Sunday. For this he must go down into the pit, for this he must invade the dolorous vasts. Imperishable and wise and infinite, he still must travel hell the world to save. Into the eternal light the secret law of each thing is fulfilled, all contraries heal their long dissidence. Their meet and clasp the eternal opposites, their pain becomes a violent fiery joy, evil turns back to its original good, and sorrow lies upon the breasts of bliss. She has learned to weep glad tears of happiness, her gaze is charged with a wistful ecstasy. Then shall be ended here the law of pain. Earth shall be made a home of heaven's light, a seer heaven-born shall lodge in human breasts, the superconscient beam shall touch men's eyes and the truth-conscious world come down to earth invading matter with the spirit's ray, awaking its silence to immortal thoughts, awaking the dumb heart to the living word. This mortal life shall house eternity's bliss, the body's self taste immortality. Then shall the world Redeemer's task be done, till then must life carry its seed of death and sorrow's plaint be heard in the slow night. O mortal, bear this great world's law of pain, in thy hard passage through a suffering world lean for thy soul's support on heaven's strength, turn towards high truth, aspire to love and peace. A little bliss is lent thee from above, a touch divine upon thy human days. Make of thy daily way a pilgrimage, for through small joys and griefs thou movest towards God. Haste not towards Godhead on a dangerous road, open not thy doorways to a nameless power, climb not to Godhead by the Titan's road. Against the law he pits his single will, across its way he throws his pride of might. Heavenward he clambers on a stair of storms aspiring to live near the deathless Sunday he strives with a giant strength to wrest by force from life and nature the immortal's right, he takes by storm the world and fate and heaven. He comes not to the high world-maker's seat, he waits not for the outstretched hand of God to raise him out of his mortality. All he would make his own, leave nothing free, stretching his small self to cope with the infinite. Obstructing the gods' open ways, he makes his own estate of the earth's air and light, a monopolist of the world energy, he dominates the life of common men. His pain and others' pain he makes his means, on death and suffering he builds his throne. In the hurry and clangor of his acts of might, in a riot and excess of fame and shame, by his magnitudes of hate and violence, by the quaking of the world beneath his tread, he matches himself against the eternal's calm and feels in himself the greatness of a god. Power is his image of celestial self. The Titan's heart is a sea of fire and force, he exults in the death of things and ruin and fall, he feeds his strength with his own and others' pain, in the world's pathos and passion he takes delight, his pride, his might call for the struggle and pang. He glories in the sufferings of the flesh and covers the stigmata with the Stoic's name. His eyes blinded and visionless stare at the sun, the seeker's sight receding from his heart can find no more the light of eternity, he sees the beyond as an emptiness void of soul and takes his neither would stamp his single figure on the world, obsess the world's rumors with his single name. His moments center the vast universe. He sees his little self as very God. His little I has swallowed the whole world, his ego has stretched into infinity. His mind, a beat in original nothingness, ciphers his thought on a slate of hourless time. He builds on a mighty vacancy of soul a huge philosophy of nothingness. In him nirvana lives and speaks and acts impossibly, creating a universe. An eternal zero is his formless self, his spirit the void impersonal absolute. Take not that stride, O growing soul of man, cast not thyself into that night of God. The soul suffering is not eternity's key, or ransom by sorrow heaven's demand on life. O mortal, bear, but ask not for the stroke, too soon will grief and anguish find thee out. Too enormous is that venture for thy will, only in limits can man's strength be safe, yet is infinity thy spirit's goal, its bliss is there behind the world's face of tears. A power is in thee that thou knowest not, thou art a vessel of the imprisoned spark. It seeks relief from time's envelopment, and while thou shut'st it in, the seal is pain, bliss is the Godhead's crown, eternal, free, unburdened by life's blind mystery of pain. Pain is the signature of the ignorance attesting the secret God denied by life, until life finds him pain can never end. Calm is self's victory overcoming fate. Bear, thou shalt find at last thy road to bliss. Bliss is the secret stuff of all that lives, even pain and grief are garbs of world delight, it hides behind thy sorrow and thy cry. Because thy strength is a part and not God's whole, because afflicted by the little self thy consciousness forgets to be divine as it walks in the vague penumbra of the flesh and cannot bear the world's tremendous touch, thou criest out and say'st that there is pain. Indifference, pain and joy, a triple disguise, attire of the rapturous dancer in the ways, withhold from thee the body of God's bliss. Thy spirit's strength shall make thee one with God, thy agony shall change to ecstasy, indifference deepen into infinity's calm and joy laugh nude on the peaks of the absolute, O mortal who complainst of death and fate, accuse none of the harms thyself hast called, this troubled world thou hast chosen for thy home, thou art thyself the author of thy pain. Once in the immortal boundlessness of self, in a vast of truth and consciousness and light the soul looked out from its felicity. It felt the spirit's interminable bliss, it knew itself deathless, timeless, spaceless, one, it saw the eternal, lived in the infinite. Then, curious of a shadow thrown by truth, it strained towards some otherness of self, it was drawn to an unknown face peering through night. It sensed a negative infinity, a void supernal whose immense excess imitating God and everlasting time offered a ground for nature's adverse birth and matter's rigid hard unconsciousness harboring the brilliance of a transient soul that lights up birth and death and ignorant life. A mind arose that stared at nothingness till figures formed of what could never be, it housed the contrary of all that is. A naught appeared as being's huge sealed cause, its dumb support in a blank infinite, in whose abysm spirit must disappear, a darkened nature lived and held the seed of spirit hidden and feigning not to be. Eternal consciousness became a freak of an unsouled almighty inconscient and breathed no more a spirit's native air. Bliss was an incident of a mortal hour, a stranger in the insentient universe. As one drawn by the grandeur of the void the soul attracted leaned to the abyss, it longed for the adventure of ignorance and the marvel and surprise of the unknown and the endless possibility that lurked in the womb of chaos and in nothing's gulf or looked from the unfathomed eyes of chance. It tired of its unchanging happiness, it turned away from immortality, it was drawn to hazard's call and danger's charm, it yearned to the pathos of grief, the drama of pain, perdition's peril, the wounded bear escape, the music of ruin and its glamour and crash, the savor of pity and the gamble of love and passion and the ambiguous face of fate. A world of hard endeavor and difficult toil, and battle on extinction's perilous verge, a clash of forces, a vast incertitude, the joy of creation out of nothingness, strange meetings on the roads of ignorance and the companionship of called it from its too safe eternity. A huge descent began, a giant fall, for what the spirit sees, creates a truth and what the soul imagines is made a world. A thought that leaped from the timeless can become, indicator of cosmic consequence and the itinerary of the gods, a cyclic movement in eternal time. Thus came, born from a blind tremendous choice, this great perplexed and discontented world, this haunt of ignorance, this home of pain, there are pitched desires tents, grief's headquarters. A vast disguise conceals the eternal's bliss, then Aswapati answered to the seer, is then the spirit ruled by an outward world? O seer, is there no remedy within? But what is fate if not the spirit's will after long time fulfilled by cosmic force? I deemed a mighty power had come with her, is not that power the high compeer of fate? But Narad answered covering truth with truth, O Aswapati, random seem the ways along whose banks your footsteps stray or run in casual hours or moments of the gods, yet your least stumblings are foreseen above. Infallibly the curves of life are drawn following the stream of time through the unknown, they are led by a clue the calm immortals keep. This blazoned hieroglyph of prophet mourns a meaning more sublime in symbols writes than sealed thought wakes to, but of this high script how shall my voice convince the mind of earth? Heaven's wiser love rejects the mortal's prayer, unblinded by the breath of his desire, unclouded by the mists of fear and hope, it bends above the strife of love with death, it keeps for her privilege of pain. A greatness in thy daughter's soul resides that can transform herself and all around but must cross on stones of suffering to its goal. Although designed like a nectar cup of heaven, of heavenly ether made she sought this air, she too must share the human need of grief and all her cause of joy transmute to pain. The mind of mortal man is led by words, his sight retires behind the walls of thought and looks out only through half-open doors. He cuts the boundless truth into sky strips and every strip he takes for all the heavens. He stares at infinite possibility and gives to the plastic vast the name of chance, he sees the long results of an all-wise force planning a sequence of steps in endless time but in its links imagines a senseless chain or the dead hand of cold necessity, he answers not to the mystic mother's heart, misses the ardent heavings of her breast and feels cold rigid limbs of lifeless law. The will of the timeless working out in time in the free absolute steps of cosmic truth he thinks a dead machine or unconscious fate. A magician's formulas have made matters laws and while they last, all things by them are bound, but the spirit's consent is needed for each act and freedom walks in the same pace with law. All here can change if the magician choose. If human will could be made one with God's, if human thought could echo the thoughts of God, man might be all the force of man can be driven by God's force, then is he a miracle doing miracles. For only so can he be nature's king. It is decreed and such oven must die, the hour is fixed, chosen the fatal stroke. What else shall be is written in her soul but till the hour reveals the fateful script, the writing waits illegible and mute. Fate is truth working out in ignorance. O King, thy fate is a transaction done at every hour between nature and thy soul with God for its foreseeing arbiter. Fate is a balance drawn in destiny's book. Man can accept his fate, he can refuse. Even if the one maintains the unseen decree, he writes thy refusal in thy credit page, for doom is not a close, a mystic seal. Arisen from the tragic crash of life, arisen from the body's torture and death, the spirit rises mightier by defeat, its godlike wings grow wider with each fall. Its splendid failures sum to victory. O man, the events that meet thee on thy road, though they smite thy body and soul with joy and grief, are not thy fate, they touch thee a while and pass, even death can cut not short thy spirit's walk, thy goal, the road thou choosest are thy fate. On the altar throwing thy thoughts, thy heart, thy works, thy fate is a long sacrifice to the gods till they have opened to thee thy secret self and made thee one with the indwelling God. O soul, intruder in nature's ignorance, armed traveler to the unseen supernal heights, thy spirit's fate is a battle and ceaseless march against invisible opponent powers, adventurer through blind unforeseeing time, a forced advance through a long line of lives, it pushes its spearhead through the centuries. Across the dust and mire of the earthly plain, on many guarded lines and dangerous fronts, in dire assaults, in wounded slow retreats, holding the ideals ringed and battered fort or fighting against odds in lonely posts, or camped in night around the bivouacs fires awaiting the tardy trumpets of the dawn, in hunger and in plenty and in pain, through peril and through triumph and through fall, through life's green lanes and over her desert sands, up the bald moor, along the sunlit ridge, in serried columns with a straggling rear led by its nomad vanguard's signal fires, marches the army of the way-lost God. Then late the joy ineffable is felt, then he remembers his forgotten self, he has refound the skies from which he fell. At length his front's indomitable line forces the last passes of the ignorance, advancing beyond nature's last known bounds, reconnoitering the formidable unknown, beyond the landmarks of things visible. It mounts through a miraculous upper air till climbing the mute summit of the world he stands upon the splendor peaks of God. In vain thou mournst that such Arvan must die, his death is a beginning of greater life, death is the spirit's opportunity. A vast intention has brought two souls close and love and death conspire towards one great end. For out of danger and pain heaven bliss shall come, time's unforeseen event, God's secret plan. This world was not built with random bricks of chance, a blind God is not destiny's architect, a conscious power has drawn the plan of life, there is a meaning in each curve and line. It is an architecture high and grand by many named and nameless masons built in which unseeing hands obey the unseen, and of its master builders she is one. Queen, strive no more to change the secret will, time's accidents are steps in its vast scheme. Bring not thy brief and helpless human tears across the fathomless moments of a heart that knows its single will and God's as one, it can embrace its hostile destiny, it sits apart with grief and facing death, affronting adverse fate armed and alone. In this enormous world standing apart in the mightiness of her silent spirit's will, in the passion of her soul of sacrifice her lonely strength facing the universe, affronting fate, asks not man's help nor God's. Sometimes one life is charged with earth's destiny, it cries not for succor from the time-bound powers. Alone she is equal to her mighty task. Intervene not in a strife too great for thee, a struggle too deep for mortal thought to sound, its question to this nature's rigid bounds when the soul fronts nude of garbs the infinite, its too vast theme of a lonely mortal will pacing the silence of eternity. As a star, uncompanioned, moves in heaven unastonished by the immensities of space, traveling infinity by its own light, the great are strongest when they stand alone. A God-given might of being is their force, a ray from self's solitude of light the guide, the soul that can live alone with itself meets God, its lonely universe is their rendezvous. A day may come when she must stand unhelped on a dangerous brink of the world's doom and hers, carrying the world's future on her lonely breast, carrying the human hope in a heart left soul to conquer or fail on a last desperate verge, alone with death and close to extinction's edge. Her single greatness in that last dire scene must cross alone a perilous bridge in time and reach an apex of world destiny where all is won or all is lost for man. In that tremendous silence lone and lost of a deciding hour in the world's fate, in her soul's climbing beyond mortal time, when she stands soul with death or soul with God apart upon a silent desperate brink, alone with herself and death and destiny, as on some verge between time and timelessness, when being must end or life rebuild its base, alone she must conquer or alone must fall. No human aid can reach her in that hour, no armored God stand shining at her side. Cry not to heaven, for she alone can save. For this the silent force came mission down, in her the conscious will took human shape, she only can save herself and save the world. O Queen, stand back from that stupendous scene, come not between her and her hour of fate. Her hour must come and none can intervene, think not to turn her from her heaven-sent task, strive not to save her from her own high will. Thou hast no place in that tremendous strife, thy love and longing are not arbiters there, and the heart fails and only are death and night. God given her strength can battle against doom even on a brink where death alone seems close and no human strength can hinder or can help. Think not to intercede with the hidden will, intrude not twixt her spirit and its force, but leave her to her mighty self and fate. He spoke and ceased and left the earthly scene. Away from the strife and suffering on our globe, he turned towards his far-off blissful home. A brilliant arrow pointing straight to heaven, the luminous body of the ethereal seer assailed the purple glory of the noon and disappeared like a receding star vanishing into the light of the unseen. But still a cry was heard in the infinite, and still to the listening soul on mortal earth a high and far imperishable voice chanted the anthem of eternal love. Book 7. The Book of Yoga. Canto 1. The joy of union, the ordeal of the foreknowledge of death and the heart's grief and pain. Fate followed her foreseen immutable road. Man's hopes and longings build the journeying wheels that bear the body of his destiny and lead his blind will towards an unknown goal. His fate within him shapes his acts and rules, its face and form already are born in him, its parentage is in his secret soul. Here matter seems to mold the body's life and the soul follows where its nature drives. Nature and fate compel his free will's choice. But greater spirits this balance can reverse and make the soul the artist of its fate. This is the mystic truth our ignorance hides. Doom is a passage for our inborn force, our ordeal is the hidden spirit's choice, Ananke is our being's own decree. All was fulfilled the heart of Savitri, flower sweet and adamant, passionate and calm, had chosen and on her strength's unbending road forced to its issue the long cosmic curve. Once more she sat behind loud hastening hoofs, a speed of armored squadrons and a voice far heard of chariots bore her from her home. A couchant earth wakened in its dumb muse looked up at her from a vast indolence, hills wallowing in a bright haze, large lands that lulled at ease beneath the summer heavens, region on region spacious in the sun, cities like chrysolites in the wide blaze and yellow rivers pacing lion manadal to the Shalwa march's emerald line, a happy front to iron vastnesses and austere peaks and titan solitudes. Once more was near the fair and fated place, the borders gleaming with the grove's delight where first she met the face of Suchavan and he saw like one waking into a dream some timeless beauty and reality, the moon-gold sweetness of heaven's earth-born child. The past receded and the future neared, far now behind lay Madra's spacious halls, the white carved pillars, the cool dim alcoves, the tinged mosaic of the crystal floors, the towered pavilions, the wind-rippled pools and gardens humming with the murmur of bees, forgotten soon or a pale memory the fountain's plash in the white stone-bound pool, the thoughtful noontide's brooding solemn trance, the colonnade's dream grey in the quiet eve, the slow moonrise gliding in front of night. Left far behind were now the faces known, the happy silken babble on laughter's lips and the close clinging clasp of intimate hands and adoration's light in cherished eyes offered to the one sovereign of their life. Nature's primeval loneliness was here only was the voice of bird and beast, the ascetic's exile in the dim-souled huge inhuman forest far from cheerful sound of man's blithe converse and his crowded days. In a broad eve with one red eye of cloud, through a narrow opening, a green-flowered cleft, out of the stare of sky and soil they came into a mighty home of emerald dusk. There onward led by a faint brooding path which toiled through the shadow of enormous trunks and under arches misers of sunshine, they saw low thatched roofs of a hermitage huddled beneath a patch of azure hue in a sunlit clearing that seemed the outbreak of a glad smile in the forest's monstrous heart, a rude refuge of the thought and will of man watched by the crowding giants of the wood. Arrived in that rough-hewn homestead they gave, questioning no more the strangeness of her fate, their pride and loved one to the great blind king, a regal pillar of fallen mightiness and the stately careworn woman once a queen who now hoped nothing for herself from life, but all things only hoped for her one child, calling on that single head from partial fate all joy of earth, all heaven's beatitude. Adoring wisdom and beauty like a young god's, she saw him loved by heaven as by herself, she rejoiced in his brightness and believed in his fate and knew not of the evil drawing near. Lingering some days upon the forest verge like men who lengthen out departure's pain, unwilling to separate sorrowful clinging hands, unwilling to see for the last time a face, heavy with the sorrow of a coming day and wondering at the carelessness of fate who breaks with idle hands her supreme works, they parted from her with pain-fraught burdened hearts as forced by inescapable fate we part from one whom we shall never see again, driven by the singularity of her fate, helpless against the choice of Savitri's heart they left her to her rapture and her doom in the tremendous forest's savage charge. All put behind her that was once her life, she abode with such Arvin in the wild woods, priceless she deemed her joy so close to death, apart with love she lived for love alone. As if self-poised above the march of days, her immobile spirit watched the haste of time, a statue of passion and invincible force, an absolutism of sweet imperious will, a tranquility and a violence of the gods indomitable and immutable. At first to her beneath the sapphire heavens the sylvan solitude was a gorgeous dream, an altar of the summer's splendor and fire, a sky-topped flower-hung palace of the gods and all its scenes a smile on rapture's lips and all its voices bards of happiness. There was a chanting in the casual wind, there was a glory in the least sunbeam, night was a chrysoprase on velvet cloth, a nestling darkness or a moonlit deep, day was a purple pageant and a hymn, a wave of the laughter of light from morn to eve. His absence was a dream of memory, his presence was the empire of a god. A fusing of the joys of earth and heaven, a tremulous blaze of nuptial rapture past, a rushing of two spirits to be one, a burning of two bodies in one flame. Opened were gates of unforgettable bliss, two lives were locked within an earthly heaven and fate and grief fled from that fiery hour. But soon now failed the summer's ardent breath and throngs of blue-black clouds crept through the sky and rain fled sobbing over the dripping leaves and storm became the forest's titan voice. Then listening to the thunder's fatal crash and the fugitive pattering footsteps of the showers and the long unsatisfied panting of the wind and sorrow muttering in the sound-vexed night, the grief of all the world came near to her. Night's darkness seemed her future's ominous face. The shadow of her lover's doom arose and fear laid hands upon her mortal heart. The moments swift and ruthless raced, alarmed her thoughts, her mind remembered Narad's date. A trembling moved accountant of her riches, she reckoned the insufficient days between, a dire expectancy knocked at her breast, dreadful to her were the footsteps of the hours, grief came, a passionate stranger to her gate, banished when in his arms, out of her sleep it rose at morn to look into her face. Vainly she fled into abysms of bliss from her pursuing foresight of the end. The more she plunged into love that anguish grew, her deepest grief from sweetest gulfs arose. Remembrance was a poignant pang, she felt each day a golden leaf torn cruelly out from her too slender book of love and joy. Thus swaying in strong gusts of happiness and swimming in foreboding's somber waves and feeding sorrow and terror with her heart, for now they sat among her bosom's guests or in her inner chamber paced apart, her eyes stared blind into the future's night. Out of her separate self she looked and saw, moving amid the unconscious faces loved, in mind a stranger though in heart so near, the ignorant smiling world go happily by upon its way towards an unknown doom and wondered at the careless lives of men,